Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Mad Mamluks. I'm Mahin and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Summer and Sim. On today's show, I'd like to welcome Nadeen Mustafa, who is the Executive Director of Taiba Organization. Nadeen is a Houston, Texas native with a master's degree in International Affairs and Economic and Political Development from Columbia University, New York City. She has been with Taiba this year, and Taiba, is, from my understanding, Nadeen, is an organization that is seeking to empower Muslim women through mentorship and and I think it's called the safe space, etc. My question to you, I'd like you to elaborate a little bit what Taiba's about. But when I first see the website, I was like, why? Islam's a safe space for women. Why do you need a separate organization? And what are y'all trying to get at here?
Totally. That's a great question. Well, really, Taiba, it's not about fixing the religion in any way, because it doesn't need to be fixed. It's just a matter of creating programs that are focused on women, for women, by women, and really has a focus also on kind of vulnerable members of the community that have been feeling disenfranchised. It's really interesting because diversity is a blessing and a curse. We have such a diverse community, but sometimes that diversity can cause, a little clickiness. So we're just trying to address that issue and really make a place that's all about inclusion.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into Taiba and all the things that it's doing. What made you work with this organization as opposed to so many other efforts that are happening throughout the country?
Sure. So you mentioned, briefly in my introduction that, I just moved back from New York. I was there for about 3 years. I worked at a tech startup and did a lot of work in social entrepreneurship. And I'm just a big believer of taking whatever skill sets and gifts that you've acquired from your education and your experience and then giving them back to your own community. So that's exactly what I did. When I moved back to Houston, I actually didn't have a plan. I've worked with a lot of different nonprofits here. But when I was approached with this idea, at the time it was just an idea. I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to do. I've always enjoyed working with women and, working specifically with, this community, which has so many gifts and talents. I thought it was just a great idea and just an honor to participate in.
So how long has the organization existed? I know you're an executive director. There's a board of people that you're working with, including a founder. How long has Taiba been around?
Sure. It's been around about 8 months. But since then, we've really come a long way. And I can tell you all about that if you're interested.
So you were involved as far as the startup and the founding went?
Absolutely. Our founder, she's a philanthropist here in town. She's a convert/revert, born and raised in Mississippi. And she came to me when I moved back and said, you know what, I have this idea. She didn't have a name, no mission statement, no vision statement, no website. She just said, this is my passion and I want to give back. Can you help me make this vision a reality? And so we started from that little seed and now we've really grown, alhamdulillah.
Mashallah, that's really awesome. So I'm seeing like a lot of organizations similar to this, even in the Chicagoland area, and it might just be like where there are hubs of people, there are also cliques of people, and then there are people that are outsiders that might move in from other places and stuff like that. What's a demographic of the type of women that you guys are serving, and I don't just mean demographic racially, but also socially, what's happening with these women that requires this like intensive mentorship?
Sure. That's a great point. Women, working with women or working with Muslim women is actually kind of in right now. I'm doing air quotations. People are starting to notice, which is hilarious, that, this is a, under-tapped resource in our communities, right? So people come in from the immigrant community, the refugee community, and they have all this background, but there hasn't been enough of a platform for them. So people are starting to notice. And so there's a few different organizations popping up. But what we do see is a lot of these organizations focused on youth, but not necessarily women. So we're looking at post-college women, everywhere from, 25 to, 95, right? So it's a little bit of a broad age range. But the thought is that it's different socioeconomic levels, different educational backgrounds, but with the same idea that they've been feeling isolated by, in one shape or form. So it's really to serve that emotional need. And that's really kind of our niche and our what differentiates us.
And are they all immigrants or?
It's a combination. There's some, born and raised, here, and then there's a subcategory of refugees. We work a lot with the refugee population, and then we also have new immigrants. So very diverse in that way.
So walk us through the process. Now, imagine me as an immigrant woman who is has the basic education that her country provided. Let's just say a high school level education. Mm-hmm. She's new to the country, and she's let's just say she's single as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She's the sole provider for her family. Mm-hmm. And how does Taiba help her navigate the waters?
Absolutely. That's a great example of someone that would be interested in our programming. There's 3 different ways that she could get involved. One is obviously through the peer mentorship program. So the mentorship is not, your traditional sense of career mentorship, right? It's also kind of social and spiritual. So if someone wants to, understand what the masajid in her area have to offer, what school she could put her kids in, go to social events, we have, those provided through our programming. So you get matched with your mentor, and you automatically now have almost like a social and spiritual liaison for this new city that you're a part of, which is just a huge value add, especially to someone who's new and has all these different pressures and issues. Finding a woman that's from a similar community, but may have different skill sets or values that she can learn from. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is we do have skills building workshops. So this woman, or you in this situation, our hypothetical friend,
sometimes I'll dress up as one. No, yeah. I'm kidding.
Your secret's out, Sim. I didn't think it was going to happen.
No judgment zone. No judgment zone. So
it's a safe space,
she
right?
could come to this skills building workshop. She could take ESL classes. We also do, confidence and public speaking, all these different things that might help her, with integration and feeling welcome.
Now, what is it? What is Taiba doing that's different from other organizations? Why didn't the founder or you join other organizations that might be doing something similar?
Like, for example, here in Chicago, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Inshallah, you can definitely answer. But like, for example, here in Chicago, we've definitely had similar situations where not even necessarily immigrant women who have just kind of arrived in the country, but even women from all over the country that may have moved to Chicago for marriage or for jobs and things like that, then they just don't have a group to socialize with. They don't have a group to, kind of connect with. And having that kind of like open door policy of like, okay, anybody can come and anybody can socialize. That's been really, really important in nurturing women who've been here for a long time, but don't have like a solid support network.
Exactly.
So I think in that aspect, that's something that, I see a lot in communities that are, the bigger cities, but then they have people that are kind of a mishmash from everywhere.
Yeah, and I don't know, what specifically, Chicago is like, but I know that, in Texas and some of the other communities, some California and Florida, some people that we've spoken to, often the masajid can be kind of one ethnic group. So you'll have like a Pakistani group and then kind of the Arabs. We have a whole mosque that's just Libyans here in Houston. So, our hope is that, people can, collaborate and kind of build more of an ecosystem where people can, what we like to call mosque moments, where you come in and you're trying to look for a friend, but instead you meet, some auntie that's judging your lopsided scarf. And then you're like, I'm never coming back here again, trying to avoid these mosque moments and really building kind of a culture of intercultural inclusivity and welcoming, really, which is something we have to be more intentional about. And that comes from obviously the manners and the akhlaq that our faith already teaches us. So just kind of rejuvenating the ecosystem in an intentional way.
It's funny that you mentioned mosque moments. I don't know if you've heard of Unmosque. That whole movement was
Oh boy.
and safe spaces. It's all out of Chicago, so there are
Yes.
plenty of women that have had mosque moments, and
It's
here it's
too
not even
real.
limited to aunties. It's like uncles will join in too if they see a lopsided hijab.
Everybody. It's like out of control.
Yeah, it triggers people. I don't know why, but it does.
It's true.
Isn't-
Well, it's a problem, and people come to us and we hear these stories over and over again. So we just need to learn how to get over ourselves and communicate better.
I thought the Unmosque director was from Houston.
I definitely have, we just went to the ICNA conference in DC, the women's conference. We went to, Chicago a few months ago and met a few people, but I'm not sure if we've actually met the director.
All right, so since we talked about, what's your solution to a sister that is like, so in the way I understand the dean is that women should be praying at home anyways. So I don't know why you're going to the mosque, right? I thought that's a sunnah that's more pleasing to Allah. But anyways, if you want to be a rebel and go to the masjid and you feel like unmosque, what's the solution for that?
Well, that's
Sure,
funny that
sure.
you're saying that she shouldn't go to the masjid, but here, mashallah, your wife goes to the hospital every day,
At 2 a.m.?
And that's okay. It's okay to go to the hospital at 2 a.m. to
Hey,
be
Mahin,
a
you are
doctor,
driving her
but-
to the hospital, right? That's because she needs a madam to
Guys
travel.
are crazy. That's a really good point. I mean, we get that a lot, actually. I mean, it's not a shocking statement, but our philosophy is that the mosque really needs to be a community center, right? So even if you're not going to every Friday prayer, you should still be able to find some, social, kind of community activities that are specifically targeted towards women, right? So the women need to feel like this is a place where they can, not only have programs for their kids, but they can go there and, learn and grow and, just feel comfortable. So that's what we're really trying to shift kind of the purpose of, not just you come in, you do your rakatain and leave, right?
So is
it's really
Taiba
trying to make it
working?
more.
Is Taiba
Sorry?
working with masajid to,
Absolutely.
incorporate that? Okay, so do you guys run Taiba then out of the masajid, or how's that working?
Yeah, so it's been such a blessing. We, in our first few months, we had 1,000 women join our database just because
Mashallah.
this spoke to them. I know. So alhamdulillah, just 1,000 women came forward, and they're from all different masajid here in town. And we were, I'm a development person. I'm really big on, community needs assessments. So we spent the first few months just having a million conversations with different mosques, different masajid here in Houston, and asking them, who are your rock star women? Like, bring them forward, right? And because of that, we've been able to really, facilitate this buy-in from different communities all over town. About 8 masajid we have already on our list that we can call and do different events there. And the thought is to go into different places, introduce the communities to each other, and really create this unified kind of organization where everyone can go and participate.
Okay. As far as the mentorship program goes, is there, I assume there's some kind of an application process. Is there a person that you wouldn't accept for mentorship just based, like, for example, let's say, it's my personal belief that every body should have a mentor or a coach.
Absolutely.
Right?
I 100% agree.
So let's take my wife, for example. She's like, Summer thinks she's like Superwoman, right?
She is.
But
Dude, she is, if you don't realize that yet.
but anyways, so let's say she wants a coach. She still wants a mentor to like still get better, right? It's like, I need to sleep less and get more done and like, deliver more babies, right? Like, or whatever. She's got some goals and she wants
Personal goals.
goals, right? Or, etc.
Right.
Do you guys have that avenue where like, where some like, generally somebody is running like a well-oiled machine, but, I want to, I'm like, I don't want to use a car example. Let's say I'm a Honda Accord, but I want to upgrade myself to a Mercedes Benz, do you guys have that?
That's a great, well, I wish we could just, all get automatically upgraded in a few months. But the idea is that everybody has something to learn and grow, right? Personally, spiritually, professionally. There's always a way that we can learn. And the best way is to learn from each other. So we have it set up as like a peer mentorship. So in the traditional mentor relationship, you have mentor and mentee, as in the mentor is some, guru of sorts that knows all things. And then the mentee is like, teach me, you know, oh, wise one. But for us, we're more of a peer-to-peer in that both sides have different skill sets that we can learn from. So for example, for your wife, perhaps she has this professional know-how, and she could be matched with someone who, you know, is really, you know, goes above and beyond with, you know, work-life balance and, you know, spiritual, you know, guidance, whatever. What's so unique about our platform is that we have partnered with kind of the top of the line software that, you know, some of the big corporations use. When you do your application process, you can actually identify some of the skill sets, mostly soft skills, that you want to work on, and it will match you to someone who identifies themselves as strong in those skill sets. So, for example, if she wants to work on conflict resolution or, you know, communication or emotional intelligence, it will match her with someone who has those skill sets. So it's a really interesting way to grow in you know, a multitude of aspects.
Mashallah, that's like eHarmony for for Muslim women amongst other women, right?
eHarmony for soul sisters.
Exactly. And you know what? There's this huge market now emerging for like mom friends, and there's like all these jokes and memes and funny things about that, about how having mom friends is so different than like your regular friendships because you nurture each other in different ways because you're in such a different stage of life. And I even saw there are like new apps. Like instead of Tinder and Minder, it's like mom friends matching up with each other. So
really sign me up.
There's a whole demand you guys don't know about.
Mahin's really upset right now. He's very upset that Muslim women are reducing or mitigating their dependence on Muslim men.
Well, what are you going to do when lesbian women start showing up?
Say it again.
Like when lesbian women start showing up, does that change the safe space then?
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
I mean, it's a legit concern, right?
No, I don't think
you know what though, like so I run a very, very small operation here in Chicago where it's a very similar kind of like idea, right? Where women can come. There's no clique. We have women of different diversities. We don't have a formal mentorship program, but we have like open halaqas and brunches for socialization and community organizing and stuff, right? So all that stuff. And we had someone come to our group who she's a convert and she's openly a lesbian, you know? And we still welcome her with open arms to our gatherings because we feel like, look, she needs a place to go and be Muslim. Right?
She doesn't hit on you guys?
Huh?
She doesn't hit on y'all?
That hasn't been an issue, you know? That's never come up.
I tell you, it's subtle.
It's very interesting because someone could say the same thing about, you know, someone shows up at the masjid in her like Daisy Dukes, right? You know, maybe she, you know, some of her life choices or the way she looks on the outside, you know, the first reaction is like shock and horror, right? But instead of having that first reaction, how can she learn or how can she make friends or feel included or grow in any way?
Oh, the brothers will definitely make her feel included.
Well, there you go.
Unless she runs into that uncle, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're trying to intercept her before she hits the brothers / the uncle / the auntie, you know, and really make her, you know, how can people learn? How can they, you know, we don't want to turn them off, right? So the first part is, you know, you have to make a friend. The very first step is making a friend, and that's really what we're trying to do.
So, like, on this whole theme, as we brought in, because the concept that you guys are doing sounds like something that will be appealing to not only Muslim women, but non-Muslim women.
Right.
I know y'all are pretty new, but is there something that y'all thought about that if non-Muslim women start hearing about you guys, they want to, like, start... You know,
it's already happened. It's already happened. We've had, you know, kind of allies in different communities. As we, you know, do our events, our very first event was 130 women, you know, just showed up, you know, and we didn't even really advertise. And it was non-Muslim women too. And they said, gosh, we just love what you're doing. And we want to learn from you, and you can learn from our communities as well. So we have events where, you know, we're trying to demystify the community as well. So it has a little bit of a dawah section, you know, probably more in the future. You know, clean up your house before you invite guests, right? But the idea is that, women from, our neighboring churches, may have some sort of program. They have these bake sales and all these different things where people feel super included. So we can always learn from them. And people have just loved, the idea that sisterhood has no faith, right? Sisterhood is something, that transcends that. So it's been, overwhelmingly positive.
I wonder why guys can't do anything like this.
They do. It's basketball and football, and it transcends everything.
Oh, come on. The good old boys club.
You guys have so many sporting events and the soccer at the masjid and the
I was like, we have Sufi tariqas.
Say it again?
We have Sufi tariqas.
And Jamaat al-Tabligh, where you go
Yeah.
off for 40 days,
Yeah.
a bunch of guys on their own.
We were talking on with another guest on another show about how like she's a student of one of these famous Sufi sheikhs, but saying that it's not recommended that she herself is like a student by herself. She was with her husband, right? So I was like, we have our systems, I guess, in place, but we're also pretty much on top of it and don't need mentors. Like, I mean,
you guys
we'd
are just
like
super perfect. I think that's
Yeah.
what it is. You're just totally a flawless bunch of dudes.
We're like
Mashallah,
mashallah. That species, yeah, right. I want to talk about a specific example. I saw something. I haven't verified how true this is or whatnot, but I saw it on Facebook yesterday where there is a sister that committed suicide in like middle school or something, and it was an Islamic school because I guess the teachers who are also female brought these girls in and were like, okay, we need to know all the boys you have crushes on because this is haram, etc., etc. And I don't know if you saw this or not.
No,
I haven't seen
But like, I mean,
horrifying.
there's the issue here. The root cause is obviously there's not root cause, but I mean the problem is you have Muslim girls growing up where there's I don't know how it is. If it was anything like, I mean, I was an awkward kid growing up, right? I remember like in 6th grade, man, my dad had like, I don't know if your parents were off the boat, they like set you up to get beat up at school, right? They dress you in a way with like, with a button up shirt all the way to the neck, long sleeves and like, khaki shorts and like white kids in a school in the ghetto where everyone's got like Air Jordans.
Right.
And then you get picked on, right? So that's still traumatic, and you're going through that phase and they wouldn't let you shave and you have a crustache growing and all that stuff. That's from a guy's perspective. I don't know what kind of like issues girls have grown up. I'd like to know because I have like 2 daughters who are small still, but what are the issues you're seeing in our communities with like adolescent girls growing up and these kind of issues that are popping off even in Muslim schools? Like this is happening, I think, in a Muslim school, from what I heard.
Right. Well, that's first of all, so sad if that's a true story, and definitely thinking about her and her family. And, I do want to clarify, we do work with adult women, so I'm not an expert in adolescent women and their experience, except for my own, in that I grew up here, daughter of immigrant parents, so I have my own anecdotes I could go on about what I was wearing in middle school, but was the only one
Good
wearing
thing there
khaki
wasn't like
pants.
Facebook and Insta back then for us, right? I just feel like I would never have posted anything.
So horrifying. There's some pictures no one to see ever again. But anyway, so to answer your question, something we do is we work with refugee communities, and that's the only community that we actually work with young people, especially in high school, just because it goes with our mission of working with vulnerable communities. And one thing that we do is we have a karate program where we pick up the refugee kids from the complex. So we have 2 big complexes here in Houston where there's a bunch of refugee families that have been resettled there. We pick them up. They do after school homework and karate. And in that karate program, it's run by a Muslim instructor, Samurai, who teaches them kind of confidence as well as anti-bullying skills. But what's even more interesting is that it's open to non-Muslim, non-refugee kids that are also in the class. So it's a really interesting to see how these kids grow with confidence about integration. And, we take things for granted, right? How do you invite yourself into a pickup basketball game, for example, right? Do you just, steal the ball and run away and hope that they follow you? What are the social aspects of making new friends and, starting in a new country and, all these different things. So that's something that we found has been very helpful, for the kids that we work with. So just, finding some commonalities and, forgetting about, how different you are, especially bonding over sports and, things like that, common activities, kids activities, play, has been really helpful in our experience.
What's it like for a lot of these women who see, strong, independent type woman, Western Muslim, practicing Muslim woman from your organization? I'm just imagining my mom, joining one of these organizations as she came from her country. And just, I think her first reaction would be that y'all are wild.
Yes, who are these loose women with their loose ideals and their bangs, Right. But it's mostly, honestly, we've learned, since we've set the standard from the very beginning that, come as you are, that judgment is pretty much doesn't happen, or we try to kind of stop it as it does. But I personally am, have 5 mentors, right? And one of them is, a 70-year-old immigrant woman. And the things that I learned from her, more than, this idea of this Western educated, hip, modern Muslim woman. There's so many values and skills that we underestimate, especially from our seniors and our immigrants. You never know their stories. I mean, her example is that she taught, a girls' school, back home for a number of years. She had a master's degree. We never know kind of the experiences that they can share with us. So we actually have more in common than people think when it comes to, this age gap or this immigrant gap, et cetera.
I think that's really awesome that you brought that up, because I feel the same way. There's tons of these aunties floating around that, totally. we may make them the butt of our jokes, and occasionally we have bad experiences with them, but subhanAllah, like getting to know them and like listening about their journey and how they've kind of just really, some of them are amazing in what they've done, regardless of their, accent, or they look like they're immigrants. This one auntie, I see her every Jummah, and, mashallah, she's like almost 80 years old, and yet she was a doctor for like 60 plus years, and, working with different communities, the Jewish community and the Muslim community, African American community, and now she's in her like late 80s, but she's still hustling at the masjid, like, okay, let's do this community work and that community work. And so inspiring, just even about. And she's like, I went to work every day in my sari. And we're like, oh my gosh, subhanAllah, like we would look at that and, we would be so quick to judge, or we would hear her immigrant accent and be so quick to judge that. But
so true. Even
working with these women, it opens your eyes that like, okay, I have this Western bias and this Western kind of like privilege almost that I'm trying to abuse because I happen to have an American accent. But that doesn't necessarily.
It speaks to that topic of getting over ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We just have all these assumptions that we've built in. We have a program actually November 11th that's honoring seniors. It's a senior focused / health fair. And there are these women that are just amazing when you hear their stories. And I'm just inspired every single time I start a conversation. So it's exactly what you said.
Yeah, it reminds me of my mom. So my mom used to have a TV show in Bangladesh back in because I guess they care about education over there and math and whatnot. Because she was a math teacher for high school, so she wrote these textbooks, and then she had her TV show for like math. I've never seen one; I just heard about it. As far as I just assumed that she just made it all up, because I was like, in Bangladesh, they must be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. But now that you mentioned it, maybe it is true.
Assumptions. I'm telling you, we just really need to listen. I think as a community, we should, listen to each other, listen to people's stories. Just a quick anecdote. We had a group of women, single and, single moms, divorced women, kind of just sitting together and talking about, their experiences and, their challenges. And then, a stereotypical auntie, whatever, walks in and people get all nervous, right? They don't want to share. They're thinking, oh my God, here comes the judgment. She sits down, someone else, shares their story. And this auntie just starts crying. She's like, oh my God, that's exactly my story. That's exactly what I went through. And there's this 40-year gap, right, between the person who's sharing her story and this, this older woman. But that connection was instant because we listened to each other's story, without fear of judgment. And it was just a really powerful, powerful moment for me and those that were present.
That's really amazing because you're right. Whenever people do listen to one another, all those differences really melt away, and there's so much more commonality in our struggles and the things that
Absolutely.
we've been through and things we can learn from each other, really.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
in your gatherings, are there ever times when you might have to check somebody because they did cross the line as far as, where it's not safe anymore, or they are doing a stereotypical thing that we're like trying to get away from?
Yeah, give some juicy stuff.
Yeah, when I had to shut it down.
Some drama.
Shut it down. No. Stop it. Stop it right now. Get out. No. I wish there's, this drama, but no, it is actually not that dramatic. Like I said, we start every event, our founder shares her vision. She talks about, her conversion story. We have a lot of, we share ayahs all the time about, the importance of this, sisterhood and whatever. But, of course, there are this kind of ethnic, we love conspiracy theories, I think in general, just every community does. So every once in a while you get, is this an Arab organization? Is this a Pakistani organization? Is this, just because
what's your real agenda? Are you really
exactly,
feminist? Are you trying to convert everyone to feminism?
I know, exactly.
Are you Ikhwan Muslimin? It's obvious.
Exactly. Like, what political group do you secretly, quit playing? I saw you wear green the other day, It's like, calm down. Everybody calm down. So, we have the occasional, moment where someone asks us that. But
yeah, you guys must really confuse people between Suzanne and you and Joe.
Yes,
it's like,
exactly.
What's going on here? Like, they're not one ethnicity. They're not one, particular.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, our board is, 2 Caucasian Americans, a Pakistani, a Syrian. Our volunteer leadership is, Indonesian and African American. That's the type of people that we attract, and that's really what we try to do.
I don't think we mentioned Joe Bradford is on your board. He's a regular guest on our show. So for our listeners, that's how we connected with Nadeen.
Exactly. He's great. Inshallah.
So, the question I get asked a lot is, there's all these single brothers that are eligible and available.
Yeah.
So are you guys funneling people to these brothers?
Is the matrimonial service part of the mentorship program where now you're a great woman, go get a great guy?
You're welcome. You are now graduated with an MRS degree.
There
Enjoy.
you go.
No.
Is that the end goal?
We don't have, this matrimonial. There's a lot of organizations kind of doing that. And like I mentioned, we don't focus on young women per se.
A lot of these other organizations,
really
though, what happens with them is all the guys end up signing up, and then there's 5 girls that every guy is trying to talk to.
It's so stigmatized, unfortunately, and I don't know why. I had this lady talk to me the other day, made me laugh so hard. She said, we tell our sons, you can go talk to those white girls, but don't marry them. But, don't talk to that Muslim girl, but marry her. And it's very confusing. It's so confusing, right? It just made me laugh. So I'm like, oh my God, you're totally right. So we, as a community, we probably should get our stories straight, right? And the best way, my biggest recommendation or my biggest piece of advice that I give people is, hey, read like the faith tells us to do. There's so many stories and, in the Sunnah and Hadith about it's okay to talk to people. Just don't be, loose, it's okay to talk. And once we kind of get over those cultural norms that are really kind of blocking us, we would be much more comfortable in fixing this matrimonial issue because it is an issue in our community.
Yeah, I agree with Sim. I enrolled in one. I don't think when I was single, I enrolled in one, but it was a coaching service. It wasn't there was a database, but I knew people were. I was if you're in this database, you're probably whack and you're desperate. You should need
That's what I'm saying. It's stigmatized. If you
isn't that true though?
Well, it's like I said, I always like to joke that, people are like, oh, was your marriage arranged? Oh my God, arranged. I'm calm down. I like to call it this is my favorite metaphor. Feel free to, copyright this. The Muslim way is like a la carte versus buffet style. Okay. Buffet style, you go, you try a little bit of everything, you come back for more of what you like, versus a la carte is like the ingredients are there and it's like pre-selected. I'm saying a little bit more fancy. Mm-hmm. So if we can just get over our like fear of not trying, 50 different options before we pick what we like, or being a part of a database or being a part of, the menu, I think we could probably make leaps and bounds in kind of the cultural acceptance with this process. But this is not my expertise. This is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So.
No, but
right.
Marriage is always a juicy topic. So it's funny because somebody had reached out to me this week, and I've talked to this person before, and has a sibling that's, pretty well established, good career, but she's in her 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, and I'm like, I don't know any single dudes that are like all the good single there are no good single dudes in their 30s. Well, they are, but they've been divorced. Like, are you down with someone who's divorced? And they're like, nah. Or like, I wanted to offer myself. I was like, listen, if she's down with polygamy, I'll marry her.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But I mean, but like, I do see that there's like, but I didn't want to offend the guy, so I didn't. He might listen to this podcast now, but.
I feel like Mahin's kind of like the Cartman of the Mad Mamluks. You know how like or which character is it that dies like in every
Kenny.
episode? Yeah, Kenny dies in every episode. So Mahin has to mention polygamy in every episode somehow. He like got it in there. So good job, Mahin. You got it in.
That's an awesome reference, Summer. Yeah.
But
That would make it into the Taiba podcast. Who knew? There you go.
But I guess it kind of does lend itself to a valid question. Nadeen, do you see a lot of the women that come for mentorship? Do they also seek like some help with marriage, or does their marital status, weigh on them in some way? Like, I guess I'm wondering from an emotional and psychological perspective, whether if they're single or divorced or looking for marriage, like, do they tend to say, yeah, that's a need that I have to sort out, maybe not logistically through you guys, but I have to come to terms with it in an emotional, psychological way?
Yeah, what we always like to do is we have a board that has posted notes at every event, and what I would like to see from Taiba, and then you put up a posted note and in a kind of anonymous way, and there's always one or two posted notes that would says, can Taiba get me a husband, right? I mean, it's something that's on people's mind, but like I said, we don't offer that service. But the thought is, when you build community, you also build relationships, right? So if it does happen through, you make a new friend, and then, this friend has a brother, and, he's got a friend, that's how these things happen, right? It's not like we're back home and every single neighbor is an option, right?
Yeah,
yeah, definitely.
So, so we have to be very intentional about building community relationships. We can't just be, I'm this Muslim girl and I have 0 Muslim friends and I know 0 Muslim families, and then suddenly I turn, 25 and I'm supposed to find this perfect Muslim guy, right? It's like, now I got to go find a database, right? So,
well, yeah, you got to be open to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, this is by the nature of relationship building, even woman to women, there's something that can come out of that, organically through families and whatever. But yeah, and regarding single women, we do have, we do consider them, or like divorced women, or all these different, statuses of women, often can be disenfranchised and feel kind of excluded and isolated. So we are intentional about making sure they feel invited, and we have workshops about, self-esteem and, any challenges that sometimes these communities do feel. We're really big on psychology and, self-care workshops and all these different things, because people, have challenges that they face. This is a challenge that everybody in the community has somebody that's touched by it. So why not, go through it together?
Now, where do a lot of these workshops and events of your organization take place? Are they only in Houston area mosques, or?
So we do have a hope to go national. We are a very young organization, but like I said, mashallah, we've grown so quickly. We're in about 8 to 9 mosques already. But we do try to have the events at local masajids. So every masjid has its own kind of bling, I guess. You know, this one has a great conference room. This one has a great outdoor space. So kind of almost like different field trips around town where people get familiar about the different communities and the different facilities that the masajid do have to offer. And alhamdulillah, they've been so receptive, right? There's always a gap for programming. So we come in, we have our programs, we have our speakers, and we have a great following. So alhamdulillah, they're pretty successful.
I want to jump back to there's a marriage question I had. Okay.
Oh, hit me.
So like so let's say you're dealing with a sister that's not married. Either she was single or she's divorced. Now, so I've got 2 daughters. Sim's got 3, right?
Mashallah.
All single still. I think, right? Yeah.
Definitely.
Mine are like 4 years and
they're not allowed to even talk about marriage.
But anyways, the thing I think of, some of our male listeners are going to hate me right now, but I'll be honest with you. A lot of the dudes in our community are douchebags, right? Right? And sometimes I think about, like, maybe the best option is for someone to stay single. It's not the most politically correct thing to say in the Islamic community, right? Because we're supposed to, like, you know, procreate and spread the ummah and, like, you know, eventually take over the world, right?
Mahin, you're a traitor.
Well, I do want to chime in here that, like,
goddamn
that's
coolness.
Based on, like, the programs, Nadeen, that you're mentioning, you know, like to help them build life skills and help them emotionally and spiritually and through their career. Like, yeah, there's so much more to life than being married. I have a really, really good friend right now. And she's coming out of a bad marriage for 10 years with children. And she's like, Summer, marriage is the last thing on my mind. I am single and I am enjoying my singlehood. You know, I'm building myself up, and she's doing mentoring and all these kinds of things. And really in a lot of situations, like you said, guys have not proven themselves sometimes. And, you know, after that kind of situation, it really seems like, especially alhamdulillah here where women kind of can become independent. They're taking advantage of that.
There's a lot of different things, different points that you guys hit on. So first of all, I can't speak to, you know, the nature of the character of every brother in our community, obviously. And, you know, I think that's inside and outside of our community. We have, you know, both genders have drama, right? But I would say that, kind of what you said, Summer, that we don't have this secret propaganda that we proliferate in all our programs that, okay, now that you're confident and put together, we fixed you and now go get married because that's the end all be all of life. You know, in the end, we don't know what God's plan is. And, you know, there's a lot of women that, like you said, either they were in a relationship or they didn't find a relationship and they have fulfilling and successful lives. Maybe that was God's plan, right? They have some other gift or you know, talent that they were to share or a different purpose. So we don't judge or prescribe a marital status for anyone. It's just not part of our mission. It's not part of our focus. We just want women that feel whole. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it's true. I think no matter what, developing yourself, you know, with your skills and your mind and your relationship with your faith, that's the wholeness that's important. And that's what our faith teaches us. So, that's pretty much what we think about that.
And, you know, I feel like sometimes the listeners might feel like, oh, you're saying don't be judgy and don't like say, oh, marriage isn't that important, or don't judge someone by their marital status. That sounds so like kind of cheesy or whatever. But I think it's so important that we really internalize that, because things like marriage or how many children you have, those are things that are always held over a woman's head as her worth, right? And her ability to marry someone and procreate define how good of a woman she is or how good of a mother she is. And those beliefs can be so damaging, because ultimately you may not have control of how many children you have. You don't have any control over that.
It's God's plan, and we can't really judge God's plan, which is like...
And hold that person accountable for not, like, doing what society thinks the plan should be, but Allah's plan is different for each person, you know? So I think, like, yeah, on the surface, it looks like it's, like, just a cheesy, like, let's just all be, like, you know, comfortable and safe space with each other. But it can be really damaging if we let these these values perpetuate and be like, that's the only way you can be a good woman.
And I just have to add this one point as, you know, I'm an economist at my very core, right? And this is not just a Muslim issue, right? This is something even in, the Western society, especially America, cough, cough, paid maternity leave, cough, cough, what the hell?
Yes, paid maternity leave.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is my personal opinion. It does not reflect okay. But anyway, the fact that, here in America, there's no way to win at womanhood, right? You can work, and then if you're working too much, you're a bad mom. Or if you only work and you don't become a mom, then you're a bad woman.
Yeah.
And then if you only become a mom and you don't work, then you're a bad, if you don't provide anything valuable to the economy.
Right.
So this is an issue. This is a world issue, right? And so it's not something like, oh, this backward Muslim issue, right? So it's just something I have to get on my soapbox and say. It's something that we all should really be aware of.
No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we talked about this issue, because I think, even though like my kids are still, it was funny because when my oldest daughter, when my wife was pregnant and we found out it was a girl, I think the first thought that entered my head was like, crap, I gotta find her husband now. Better start looking at that point in time when she was still like a fetus. It was like February of 2013, I think it was.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, I'm also like, I'm aware of many situations where there are some women who have been through like pretty bad marriages. And if you if they could predict the future and you're like, okay, you could have, I want to tell you what's going to happen. You could be married 5 years to this like douchebag, or you stay single.
Right.
What would you do? You'd stay single. Right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's another good point. I mean, we should also take it a step further and not just be like, oh my God, we got her married, we're done. It's like, what about healthy relationships? What about, someone who actually understands their faith and doesn't just call themselves Muslim, right? So there's a few steps that we forget to take, unfortunately, when we think about marriage in our daughters.
Oh yeah, I feel like Muslim communities in general also don't really know what a healthy relationship looks like sometimes, because on one side you have the whole like boyfriend girlfriend, ideal relationship or highly romanticized relationship where it's all like Prince Charming. And so there's that one idea. And then there's the kind of like most immigrant parents who, say salam to each other, and you're like, okay, they're married, like they sit next to each other. Like my parents would sit next to each other. I'm like, okay, so you can't really, so what does a healthy relationship even look like? And so the first generation has to navigate all that.
It's so easy if we just read and look at examples in our past. I mean, look at Khadija radiyallahu anha. She was a working woman. She was older than her husband. He respected obviously the work that she did. There's all these different kind of clues that we get from the Sahaba, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's just like we need to read, and that's really been a big theme, I think, especially when it comes to women. If our women in our communities actually understood their rights and their values in the faith, there's so much more. This is going to be putting my little feminist hat on, but women are movers and shakers in the community. No matter what, they are the center of every community and every culture in every country. And when women are empowered, that's good for everybody. And the best way to be empowered is through the education and the knowledge of their rights, their values, and their selves. And that's just, period. It's just good for everybody. So it's a really good way to start.
Oh, absolutely. And then the example that you're saying, read of in our past, just like Aisha radiallahu anha, did not bear, tens of children, and yet she's so revered, because of the contribution she was able to make. So the values that Islam has, or the value that Allah has on ourselves as beings, is not tied up in these social or these cultural values that are penetrating us.
A lot of these examples from the Seerah and in the past that they're kind of, I mean, you don't want to say a tired trope to the Seerah, but they've kind of become a little bit tiring in the sense that you hear it all the time, and there's no real practical examples that are given. Like right now, as a father, me and my wife, we're looking at things that we could do to enrich our daughters' lives. We have 3 daughters, so we're always like looking for ways to improve on and see what the other people are doing. And I think someone like you is in a unique situation where you see so many different type of women. Well, what are some tips that you could give like parents just in raising daughters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely don't pretend to be a super mom. I have one little baby on the way, so that's my first attempt at parenthood.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm not a parenting guru yet. Inshallah, hopefully I will be. But
I'm sure you're taking mental notes, right? As you see or meet all these women and you see different things that are wrong in their psyche, the ways that you could improve on as a parent.
Sure. I think the society in general that we're working on, or that we're living in, has its own challenges. And we see this all the time, no matter what community you're a part of, right? So body image, bullying, beauty standards, whatever. But in regards to kind of Muslim identity, I would say the most powerful, successful step I've seen is when, women, have these mentors. And I'm not just saying that because that's part of our program. Going to female-led halakas or seeing female scholars. I think having the story told, from that similar experience for me has been just so eye-opening. There's Sister Tamara Gray, for example. She came to town, did a halakah for us, in partnership with Rabata, her organization. And we were talking and, she told these stories that I actually had never heard in any khutbah I've ever been in.
I know exactly which talk you're talking about because she did the same one here. Blew my mind.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
I cried. I laughed. I cried again. It was just amazing.
It was really wonderful.
And it's just the power.
So refreshing. You're like, wait a second. I've heard this before. I think I know this, but it sounded so just mind-blowing.
Well, it's just the idea. I mean, it's just natural. It's such a no-brainer that, no offense to, all our male shuyukh, but they're going to talk about topics that are relevant, to maybe their personal experiences, their community, things they've seen.
Yeah, the point of view of a woman is so different.
Yeah, they can't penetrate.
So what did she talk about?
I
missed the whole, so what's this? Because we weren't allowed to go. So I mean,
it had to be a safe space, Mahin. You couldn't come and start talking about polygamy. We had to keep you out.
Hilarious.
I mean, buddy, what are the points that she covered that was made y'all cry and stuff?
Well, I'll tell you for us. So she shared a story about hijab, for example, and she talked about how, when the information came down and the revelation came and how women, went to the streets and, wrapped up or whatever. And the thought was so empowering because when we think of hijab, it's always like, she made this joke, this Arab man is like, okay, smati, it's time to cover up, this weird brother telling you what to do or, how to dress or whatever. But actually it's so, empowering to hear that actually it's a woman's choice. And that was the stories that we heard from. So hearing it that way, just really reshaped it and reframed it for a lot of people that were sitting there.
What do you mean it was the woman's choice?
Say it again?
What do you mean it was the woman's choice?
I think she's talking about how the women ran around and tried to find whatever they can to put over their head.
They were the ones with the agency, and they went and they took it.
Exactly. It was, exactly. It was not, some dude came to the house and was like, oh, hey, the revelation said that you need to cover up, so you better go cover up right now. Okay. It was, oh, God told me to do this, and I'm going to do this for God. And as a woman of faith who understands what's going on, I'm going to do this. Right? So that sense of agency, that sense of, women taking ownership of their faith and their knowledge and their relationship with God.
And so
just hearing a woman tell that story was just really empowering.
I've been watching the show on Netflix called Earth Rule, which is a Turkish story about the father of the Ottoman Empire's founder, Osman Bey the First. So, and if you read a little bit of history, you see the various implementations of Islam throughout the world, and in that culture, you didn't see women walking around with niqab and or anything. You saw people.
Their version of
I mean their understanding of what modesty was. I mean, yes, there are shari definitions of what modesty is, and of course that part is there. But there's also how Islam encompasses and is dynamic towards each culture, and how how each society will be willing to interact with their religion, you know?
I would even take it a step further that Islam is even flexible, more even deeper than our cultures, but even our personalities. The thing that blew my mind at the Tamara Gray speech was that she said, you know, subhanAllah, whenever I had converted and I became Muslim and I was reading the seerah and like, oh my gosh, Prophet said I married all these women, like as a convert, she's like, this is so hard for me to accept, but I'm like gonna just accept it because I'm Muslim now. Maybe there's some hikmah. And as she's going along, she's like, one day I realized that like if the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had only married one woman, then that one woman would be the one woman that you were allowed to be. That would be the ideal that every Muslim woman would have to look to. But he married all these different kinds of women, single, divorced, older, younger, virgin, this, that, and businesswoman, all these different kinds of women and personalities. You know, you have a shy, quiet one, you have an outgoing one, you have a bubbly one, you have a, you know, all of these and you are allowed as a woman to be all of those things and still be Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, you know? And that just like, I was like, that gives me so much power and agency that Allah's given me a personality and I'm allowed to be that personality. I don't have to somehow be submissive and passive, and that's what's an ideal Muslima, you know? So yeah,
that's
definitely.
Really well said. That's really powerful. I think one thing she also said was, or I heard from one of the speakers at this women's conference, is that the challenge and the tension that happens is when we make Muslim women one-dimensional, because we are not one-dimensional. We have, you know, like you said, different personalities and different backgrounds and different gifts and talents and challenges. And that's okay, because our faith actually is one of the only faiths that has women as a foundational builder, just a foundational, because the wives of the Prophet ﷺ knew him more than the Sahaba, right? So they knew the stories and they were telling the stories. And, you know, we are foundational, we are diverse, and that's okay. And that's something that's really beautiful about the faith.
It's interesting that Sim mentioned that you also, the Ertugrul series, right? So I've lost sleep all week because I've been going to bed at like 1:30 binge watching that show.
Yeah.
But like one thing I noticed,
you definitely got to watch it, Nadeen.
What is it called?
I think it's pronounced Arturul. It's spelled Ertgrul.
Yeah, just
on
search
Netflix.
ERT. It's called Resurrection Ertugrul.
Is it scary? It looks scary.
No. It's really high quality. I think
TV-14. Okay, I see it. I'm gonna binge it tonight. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much like my friend asked me like, "Hey, Mahin, do you have time? Like, we should meet up this weekend. Do you have any plans?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm watching Ertugrul." I'm not gonna. I have no free time to like chill with you.
My husband actually lived in Turkey for 2 years, so we're obsessed with anything Turkish. So
oh, you love it.
We're ready.
You love it.
Yeah, I mean there is some blood in it and whatnot.
No, they blur out the blood, I think.
No, there's some blood.
No. I know on Netflix they've blurred it out.
Yeah, there's some.
It's TV-14. I usually live G-rated, but I'll do it for the history.
Yeah, plus it makes Muslims look.
Sacrifice.
It makes Muslims look bad. It makes Christians look like demons. For once.
Oh my God!
Well, it's the Crusaders,
there's
right?
Some value in it. Is there some sort of historical?
Yeah. It's
I like to watch things that I learn from.
Yeah. It's based on history, but the thing is, a lot of the history back then is kind of obscure because of so much war. So I think there is some myth that was kind of tied in to, but there is a lot of fact that it's supposed to be built on fact, but I think just because so much of the history was lost, they had to use some myth. And
but my point was, so like there's two Christian women so far that I've come across, right? One of them died, but they were like pretty much these submissive, like ones living in this castle and they ain't allowed to go nowhere, right? They had one that's like kind of like an undercover spy, but
do not spoil anything for
all right,
me.
no, but then the Muslim, the Turk women in there are like, you know, out there killing people, like shooting like arrows off and stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like kind of like, who's oppressed now, Christian women?
Oh my God!
Well, I should have led an army, right?
It's not a competition. We don't want to, you know, oppress one for the other. But I hear you. I think there's a lot of misconceptions, obviously, around, you know, what a Muslim woman is, and that's why it's so powerful to have back to your question about, parenting, having a platform where women from, professional women or just rock star mothers or, people that do both, whatever, from different, choices are highlighted and can speak to people and can be heard, and can tell their stories, because that's the way that we kind of shift this paradigm about what a Muslim woman is.
Yeah, to be able to see a woman like in modern day be doing something that's against the cultural norm and then still ultimately seeing her as, a faithful servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what can break these like cultural values and the dichotomy that we have for what's valuable. If we start valuing women who are contributing in all different ways, that can help shape what our daughters see and what our daughters want to be when they grow up.
Yeah. And I had this is just a side note. This is like a non-Muslim story, but yesterday I was working, I have a strategic coach that I work with, speaking of different mentors. And, he was saying he's actually someone that I'm at Rice University. I'm doing the Leadership Institute for Nonprofit Executives. And the strategic coach was saying, if your goal in life is to make society better and to give back to your community, guess what? Making a human and contributing that to society and doing a good job at raising that human and not making them just a butt face, for lack of a better word, that's a huge contribution. And don't let anyone undermine that. And we keep forgetting that. We keep forgetting that contributions have different paths. You could, create a new pharmaceutical drug, or you can just create really great humans, or you could do something else. All of these are valid contributions, and we need to, as a society and as a community, Muslim or not, be okay with that and really validate that point.
Okay, before we wrap up here, I know your organization is kind of young, and I don't know, you probably haven't run into every situation in the book, but maybe table this thought for a future show with us or discussion, because how are you going to handle situations when you find out that women in your circle are abusive towards their husbands?
Oh my God.
I don't know if it's maybe you have had a situation already. You can touch on it.
No, we're finding out that there's a lot of women who are abusing their husbands as well.
There's various kinds of abuses, like
of course, there's mental, there's physical.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
We could totally have a whole podcast about this. But we do work with organizations that work with domestic violence and kind of broken homes, for lack of a better word. And the biggest piece of advice I would give is, being able to build a space where people feel comfortable moving forward, coming forward with these issues. Actually, there was a study done, and I can send it to you guys, about how the Muslim community is actually more likely to come forward and talk to their faith leaders about abuse that they experience. So that's a good step and something that's positive. But yeah, again, we just need to make sure that people feel comfortable coming forward with any challenges that they face.
Okay, so how can people find out more about you guys, your organization?
Sure.
Also, do you have a personal social media presence yourself?
Sure. I'm not as hip and fancy on social media as I'd like, but I do have, we are, as an organization, pretty active. So our website is www.taiba-usa.org, and I'll spell that out for y'all. It's TAIBA-USA.org. And we're on Facebook and Instagram, so just check us out, taiba-usa.org. And you guys are welcome to add me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on that. So Nadeen.Mustafa.
All right, I'll look you up. Now, Taiba organization, have you heard of Taiba Foundation? Have they come after y'all for infringement rights?
Trademark infringement.
No, I have not heard about them. We have actually a trademark, so we're set for our trademark, as well as we are 501c3 certified. So we are incorporated. So maybe we should come after them.
Oh.
I think they've been around longer.
Sheikh Rami and Sur, better watch out.
Yeah, we'll have a future podcast, Taiba versus Taiba.
Yeah, bring it on. Just kidding. Just kidding.
It's spelled differently. I guess there's no one.
Partnership.
It's like one of those names that you can't really have a monopoly on, right? It's like if
kindness, or what are you gonna do, or
what was that song? Ya Taiba? Is that Mashari Afasi song, or?
You better believe we put that nasheed on every event. You better believe it.
Nice.
You better believe
He's basically singing your theme song, right? You're like,
in
yes,
my
we already
head
have a theme song. This is it.
I thought Taiba was always about Mecca too until I watched your video.
Well, I'll tell you the little. I have to just end on this note briefly. The story of obviously Medina being called Taiba is the idea that people went obviously from the city as kind of immigrants, and they were accepted in the safe space, and so calling it Taiba was very intentional with that historical background.
Nice.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, the Sheikh Ramizan Sur's Taiba Foundation, they work in prisons, and you're much more different than they do.
It's still amazing. I'd love to connect with them. I think as a community, especially in the nonprofit space, there's no such thing as competition, just collaboration.
Yeah.
So you can always grow, and there's always commonalities in what we're trying to do.
All right, sounds good. Jazakallah khair, Nadeen, for coming on the show. For our listeners out there, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at themadmamluks@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and like our Facebook page by the same name. We're also on Instagram. And last but not least, please leave us a 5-star review in iTunes and subscribe if you haven't done so already. For our special guest, Nadeen Mustafa, and my co-host, Summer and Sim, this is Mahin signing off for the Mad Mamluks. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.